where we look at some of the headlines from the week before and look at some of the news we have coming up in the days ahead. I'm Phil O'Connor, the Live Enterprise Director here at the Oklahoman, joined today by Darnell Mayberry from our sports department, our business editor Don Mecoy, and on the telephone we've got from the Capitol our Bureau Chief Rick Green. Rick, how's it going today?
Great, Phil.
Good. Glad to have you again here today. Let's start this morning with some tragic news out of Dallas. 4 police officers killed, 7 wounded. Another transit officer also killed. Police Chief Bill City held a press conference this morning to express his condolences. Let's take a look at that.
The concern for officers is, I think, not only among our own peers here in law enforcement, but also in the community in general that supports law enforcement. It doesn't need to go unsaid. I think it can be unsaid that our hearts go out to what the family members of the officers and then the officers of the Dallas Police Department are going through right now.
Obviously a tragic day in Dallas and a tragic day around the nation as well. We've had several incidents in the last few days involving police-involved shootings of black men, and it's not the first time, unfortunately. We've seen a whole spate of this for the last year at least. Obviously we've seen it for generations, but in the last year or two, it's become a very focused, heightened issue. Darnell, what are your thoughts?
It's just, my heart goes out to the families of not only the police officers, but also the men who were murdered in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and St. Paul, Minnesota. It's just unfortunate tragedies that continue to happen in this country, and sadly, I think the entire situation is just escalating, and at some point, change needs to happen. And I think law enforcement needs to work better with communities. Communities need to work better with law enforcement officials until we get some change. And progress definitely needs to be made, because we cannot continue as a society, as a nation, going down the path that we're going.
Right. And obviously the issue of police violence against minority members has been an issue for decades. I think one of the things that's vastly changed in the whole conversation is now we are seeing it live. The girlfriend of the victim in St. Paul literally holding up a video camera through the course of, or her phone, essentially holding up the camera, allowing us to sort of see the interactions that lead to, to these kinds of incidents. And I think one of the things that people were talking about a little bit today was, at least in that one, I mean, you seem to see an officer there who is somewhat terrified in some ways. Obviously, doesn't seem calm in the moment. Obviously, he's just shot someone, so I don't expect him to be, but I think it raises questions about training and the type of, experience that these guys have at trying to de-escalate these kinds of situations. But again, being able to see this stuff firsthand, Don,
that's the thing about it. We're seeing it now. I don't know that a lot has changed. This has been going on probably for a long time. You can look at the numbers, and the numbers don't seem to have changed a lot, the statistics. But now we see the actual events. We see what the people are saying. We see what the people are doing at the moment that these decisions are made. And it is stark, and it is life, and it is death. And you're seeing it on your phone. Yeah. And that's what's changed.
And there's a couple issues. One, I think that it reminds me a little bit of almost the Vietnam War, where Americans had been through the process of war before and had typically been supportive of American wars. But once it was played out in their living room and they could see it live or see such visual depictions of what it really entailed, I think that's a little bit somewhat parallel with what we're seeing here. The other issue I think that's interesting and was raised is the fact that we can see that and whether that is a good thing or not. Whereas broadcast networks and others are restricted by the Federal Communications Commission in terms of the violence that can be shown to a vast audience, there is no filter on social media. If somebody has their Facebook Live app going, you're going to see what happens there, and so there is this unfiltered rawness, I think, that comes through, and I guess that's a good thing, but I can also see where that could be a bad thing.
Well, and you see today with what happened in Dallas, and you see Chief City talking about that today, and the empathy that his department and his officers have. And back when I was a police reporter here at the Oklahoman, one of the things that you would, when you spend a lot of time with police officers, you learn one of their biggest concerns is you try to come home at the end of every day. And a lot of officers in Dallas didn't come home at the end of yesterday. And that filters in to what's going on. You know, that's the most important thing, come home. So that can lead to bad decisions too.
Yeah.
But it also, these people put their lives on the line to protect their communities, and they're sworn peace officers, and there's a lot of stuff going on there.
Right.
But what we're seeing, you know, is stuff we've never seen before, and people's reactions, they're reacting in ways that they have not reacted before because they feel the outrage about, on both sides, about what's going on, about life and death.
Yeah. I did hear the Dallas mayor was asked this morning if there was anything that the nation could do for Dallas. And I thought it was really interesting because his response was, choose your words carefully, whether it's from the pulpit, whether it's in a political situation. Choose your words carefully because what you say has an impact. And I think, you know, I think his message was basically sort of, you know, we've got to come together. And the idea of the divisive language that often sort of follows these types of situations is not going to be helpful. So obviously a tragic situation in Dallas. We'll continue to follow that story in the coming days, months, I'm sure. Far less tragic, but I think people here maybe just as upset. KD, press conference out, holding up his new jersey, and it is not the Thunder orange and blue. What are we hearing from fans these days, Darnell?
Well, what stage of grief are we in now?
We're moving through it slowly, yes.
Slowly. And yesterday did not help. You know, Kevin Durant obviously signing with the Golden State Warriors was a blow to Oklahoma City. It was a blow to the Thunder. It was a blow to this community, this region. He's just, you don't replace a guy like Kevin Durant. He's arguably the second best player in the world. He did a lot for this community, but it was his right to make a decision to sign elsewhere as an unrestricted free agent, and that's what he did. You know, for whatever reason, I don't think we still know that yet. There could be a lot of layers there, but he certainly put himself in a position now to compete for championships and have a better chance perhaps in Golden State than he would have in Oklahoma City. We can debate the decision all day long, but you know, it was his decision to make. He served his time with this franchise. He gave it his all. And you know, you can't really hold that much resentment toward Kevin Durant because he did what he felt was best.
Do you still make the Serge Ibaka deal if you had known that Kevin Durant was, you know, headed out the door? Or was that made with the idea that he was coming back and you were getting more pieces that fit better around him? Would we have been better off keeping what we had?
I don't think you can view it in a vacuum. I mean, I think essentially they made the team better. You know, they got 3 players for one. Serge Ibaka was an incredible player for this team. He did a lot of great things to help the Thunder get to where they got to in terms of Western Conference Finals appearance, making the NBA Finals in 2012. But Victor Oladipo, Ersan Ilyasova, and Domantas Sabonis are really good players. They have the 2 young guys, Oladipo and Sabonis, have a lot of potential. And Ilyasova is a proven player who can score 10 to 15 points on any given night. So I think they got more pieces that will fit no matter if Kevin Durant's here or not. But you know, it's just tough to lose a guy like Kevin Durant because there's no replacing him.
Okay, can we start freaking out now about Westbrook?
Can we get over Kevin Durant
No,
first?
we're ready to move on to the next freak out. Are we ready to start freaking out about Russell?
It's a possibility that he can be traded because we could be in this same situation again next summer if Russell Westbrook doesn't decide to stay here in Oklahoma City and sign a long-term extension. So Sam Presti, the Thunder general manager, has a decision to make. Do you try to trade him and get some assets in return for him, or do you sort of weigh your options and let it play out and let Russell Westbrook play the season and see if you can sign him next summer? I don't think the Thunder can afford to let both of those guys walk for nothing. They lost Kevin Durant without getting anything in return. They can't afford to lose their second superstar in Russell Westbrook without getting something back in return. They've got a good young core with Cameron Payne, Steven Adams, Enes Kanter, Victor Oladipo, Andre Robertson. The list goes on of young guys that they have, but you just can't lose Russell Westbrook and not get anything in return. That will cripple your franchise in a sense. So I think they have to do something. if they don't have an assurance that he wants to be here long term.
So when KD comes back first time, does he get booed or does he get cheered?
Oh, I think it's going to be a mix of both. I think most people are going to appreciate what he did here and recognize that he gave 8 years, blood, sweat, and tears, literally, for this franchise, for this community. But then you're going to have people, the same people on YouTube, burning his jerseys or what have you. They're going to boo. There's natural resentment, not just from the simple fact that he left, but where he went. I mean, you were up 3-1 on that team in the Western Conference Finals. You had a chance to beat them, and then you joined them and hurt your franchise that you just left. So I think there's going to be some natural resentment there.
And Don, his impact isn't limited to the basketball court here in Oklahoma City. There's some business impacts of KD's departure, right?
Yeah, our Brianna Bailey did a story the other day. I mean, the first thing we found was when we went to the team store over at the Chesapeake Arena that his jerseys are 50% off now. Although the team told us, you know, that's not unusual, that we will mark things down after the end of a season, sort of ignoring the fact that he was no longer a member of the team. And you've also got some local companies, Sonic being one of them, and Orange Wave Yogurts. He's a spokesman for those local companies. And I think he'll probably continue to be a spokesman because they're not just local companies. Sonic is practically nationwide. I think they're in 46 states. And he's not their main spokesman. The two guys in the car are the main spokesman for Sonic, and every once in a while Kevin shows up in the back seat. So that relationship will probably continue, and they probably have some kind of a contract, I'm sure. And Orange Wave, I think will probably continue to use him as well. But I think on a broader perspective, when you look at the Oklahoma City economy, the Thunder were bought 10 years ago. Oklahoma City's renaissance started before that. The Thunder really added to that momentum, and Kevin Durant was a big part of that, and we started getting a lot of success, a lot of playoff games, which pumps money into the local economy. A lot of that's going to continue, I think, and we may have fewer playoff games, which is going to have some impact, but I think attendance is going to continue at the games. I don't know if they'll continue their number of sellouts that they've had, but I think that's likely. I know I belong to a consortium of a very complicated consortium of 5 guys who own 4 seats. Would
those be a fungible commodity, Don?
It might be. It is a fungible commodity,
okay.
At least in Oklahoma City.
Okay.
But we've only had one guy ever drop out of our consortium, and he was immediately replaced. And the reason that one guy dropped out was because of the Great Recession. His business was tanking, and he just had to cut back. But we've had many guys who wanted to, and gals who wanted to join our ticket consortium, and I think that demand is going to continue. I think people are going to keep going to the games, and I'm fascinated to see what, if Russell's here next year, what Russell's going to do all by himself. We've seen him play without Kevin Durant before, and it's a pretty spectacular show.
Yeah. Well, I guess KD is probably not the only person turning the corner. Don, I guess we're hearing from the Capitol that we may be turning an economic corner finally in the state. What's the latest on that? Rick, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I said Don, I meant Rick.
Okay. Yeah. Well, a economic report came out, and this is a type of report that's issued every month from the state treasurer's office, and it's similar to many of recent reports in the sense that all major revenue streams are down, and we've been seeing this for a couple of years. But what's different is over the last couple months now, there's been an increase in gross production taxes receipts, and these are the taxes paid by oil companies. And it's a possible indication that, and the fact that the price of oil has come up over the last several months, that while the industry certainly has not returned anywhere near to where it was, there are signs that it may be slowly coming back, that it may have hit bottom and is starting to return. Keeping in mind that there's still always storm clouds on the horizon, but there's some hope that they may have turned a corner.
And then you combine that with the fact that the savings from the cuts they instituted at the end of last year generated more savings than they were anticipating. So maybe the big $1.3 billion budget hole we were talking about initially isn't quite that big anymore, right?
Right. These revenue streams that I mentioned were down so much that the state had to do across-the-board cuts. and they did a couple of those big cuts, and it turns out the second one was a little bit too big, and that means there's a batch of money somewhere north of $100 million that will be returned to state agencies here in the next month or so. The word will come out on the exact figure, but it looks like there will be that revenue. And then a third factor is if the price of oil continues to come up, or at least doesn't go down again, there could be a little more money in state coffers, because the budget for the new fiscal year, which just started on July 1st, that budget is prefaced on oil that's around $40 a barrel, and now it's up in the high 40s and in a range that's approaching 50. So that may give the state a little more revenue to play with as well.
Gotcha. And Don, I think I read in our business section this week that the rig count was up, right?
It has, yeah, it's up, and it has been going up, which, you know, for months it went down every single week, and we got down nationally to an all-time low from when records have been kept. And we've seen some recovery there because we're seeing some stability in those oil prices. It seems to be staying in a range between $45 and $50. For some companies in some plays, that's a profitable level. And particularly for at least a couple of companies here in Oklahoma City, I think Continental and Devon have both said we can deal with that. You know, they're not going to be out drilling like crazy, but they're going to be drilling, which is good news, because when things were down below $30 back in February, nobody was drilling unless they just had to.
Right. What do we got coming up in the business section this weekend?
Oh, we thought we'd write more about Kevin Durant.
Well, I hear he's in the news.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, we did that story the other day about some of these companies that were affected by his decision. But as I pointed out, you know, the broader economic impact of losing Kevin Durant, well, it's a gut punch to Oklahoma City and many people in the city. It's not devastating from a financial side. The development that has been going strong here and has continued as the state has basically entered a recession, continues. The stuff that was in the pipeline is being built. The projects that were being planned continue to move forward. The financing still seems to be there. So Oklahoma City's momentum, particularly here in the core of the city, seems to be maintaining despite what's going on in the economy, the broader economy, and despite the fact that one of our favorite sons is now playing for the hated Golden State Warriors. Didn't used to hate them.
Hated. Hated is a strong word.
It's a little strong.
Strong word.
Disliked.
These are the kind of stories you can only get here from the Oklahoman at newsok.com. Be sure to check us out, read our stuff, look for us online. Darnell, Don, thanks for joining me. Rick, good to hear from you again. And we'll talk to you guys soon.